Welcome back, viewers. Let us come back to this class on ESD for the food security. Till now, whatever we have discussed, that poverty issues we have discussed, now we'll move forward to the other issues. Okay, so we have already discussed about the causes of poverty, different types of poverty, different conditions of poverty. Now we'll discuss about the vulnerability of the poor. Why the poor are so vulnerable towards the poverty, what are the reasons, what are the background context, that we'll discuss right now. So decline in the agricultural employment. Earlier we have already discussed that how the people were there, landlessness, that means they are only depending on the land, that means agriculture farm, that too they don't own also the lands, they are being hired by the other landlords for the agriculture purpose, and the moment it stopped, so that is the decline in the agricultural employment. Nowadays more and more landlords are selling their land products, lands for the more for other purposes, like the development of some kind of pumps, farms and other infrastructure, instead of giving it for the agricultural purpose. So in that situation, there is a growth, there is a high decline in the agricultural employment. So the agricultural laborers, those who are solely dependent on the agricultural jobs, works, so they get unemployed. So that is one of the reason for the poor people. So that is one of the factor of their vulnerability. Then vulnerability of the poor. So for that reason, then decline of the dryland agriculture. So again, nowadays also, due to some natural calamities, disaster, etc., the dry land which are suitable for the agriculture, that is also gradually declining. So competing the demand for water. Again, water is again another important issue. If there are any that means source of water supply for the paddy field, for the agricultural land, for watering the plants, etc., that is a major factor. If that means there is no direct access to, or other like a suitable access to water resources nearby river or canal or reservoir, something like that. So that is another difficulty for carrying forward this agricultural work. So lack of water in the marginal holdings, whatever water they are possessing, that is very marginal for somehow to manage the things. Then sufficient water is not available. So that is another factor of not being able to carry on these agricultural works. So impact of reduced unemployment, employment and the livelihood for the poor. Yes. Now due to different factors like urbanizations and the automatic, that means computerized and automated machines and digital platforms, etc. So the type of jobs, the type of employments are also gradually reducing. Only the skilled manpower, technical manpower, they are only getting the thing. So that is why the employment, the job opportunities are also reducing. That has the direct impact on the livelihood of the poor. So coping mechanism, that seasonal unemployment, like for example the rainy season. In rainy season usually the laborers they don't get work, because all the construction work, civil works are stopped during the rainy season. Only agriculture related some works are there, that is for the plantation of the nursery seeds, etc., etc. But otherwise other kinds of jobs are completely shut down during this rainy season, heavy rainy season. So that is also the cause of the seasonal unemployment. So depending on the cultural factors, as well as the geographical and climatic context or climatic factors also, some seasonal unemployment also takes place in every region, every state. So health induced vulnerability, yes, like for example due to the malnourishment, due to the severe poverty, lack of nutritional supplements, etc. The health induced vulnerability, that means weakness, that means a low immunity and all kinds of the regular, that means weaknesses are being carried on. So that is also another cause of the poor people. They are not being able to do the hard work. So impact of the ill health also. So life cycle rituals, like so many things like the marriages, marriage ceremonies, rituals, pujas, death and all kinds of other such events, major events in their life also, that also causes the disruptions in the regular employment. So in the villages, they are very much habituated to, they are very much fond of all these kind of cultural activities, seasonal cultural activities, and the rituals. So that also affects their employment or work prospects also. So again, the same, to continue the same thing. So these are some of the major problems that the poor encounter in their day-to-day life, and the stress and the shocks abound also because of the stress, continuous stress of the lack of lively stocks, living stocks or the livelihoods, and undermining. So that kind of undermining their prospects, job prospects. So again, so it creates a kind of shock and stressful situation for them. So they are also they can't find out, because of the poor the low education level, illiteracy, or poor poor skills and competency, low skills and competency. They are also not being able to negotiate with other other potential landlords, or the small potential entrepreneurs, or all salesperson, etc. They're not being able to negotiate with them regarding the continuous job prospects. So that is as a reason of this poor livelihood, poverty, etc., due to stress and the shocks. So they are ill-equipped to negotiate. That means they cannot negotiate with other resourceful or powerful people regarding their jobs, their works, their wages, or any kind of loans, etc. So this is the, you can say, this is the these are the pictures of, like, this is the idea what is the food system. That is the food system. Like, for example, here we can see, first thing is that food production, the resources and from the environmental resources, then food production, then how the food grains are being distributed among the stakeholders, like starting from the wholesale market to distributor to vendors, etc. The distribution system of these agricultural products. Then thereafter comes the consumption. So here in this system, that means there is a kind of flow. So production and distribution are also interrelated. Distribution and consumption are related. Then that relates to health and well-being. Here again, price also. One effect is that one implication is the biophysical, like the farming system, etc. Then the generic improvement, then the communication and education people, then again food related behaviors. All these are biophysical behaviors or activities. Here these are being again influenced by the policy, agricultural policy, food policy, etc. And it has the direct impact on the public health. And here you can say the social system is also there within the environment. From the environment, the resources coming, but again under this domain, that is the economic and social implications are there. Economic is that what is the agronomic picture, practices and policy things are there, and privileges are available, resources are available. Then then food processing, what are the facilities, machineries, infrastructure, instrument for the food processing. Then again policy support in the social aspect, that is from the distribution to consumption. Again the policy support, and the food this is a food preparation, policy support, and food processing. These three things are directly related to all the three stages, that is production, distribution, and consumption. So here again we can say the farming system, diversified, how the farming system, the agricultural things are being diversified. Then the genetic improvement from one season to another season, what are the development and the improvement. Then the communication regarding the communication from the after the production, then direct communication with the distributors, with the wholesale market distributors and other agencies, that is for the supply and marketing and sale of the products, even in the urban areas, etc. So these are the things. So this is the whole cycle of the food system, from the resources to the health and well-being, and through all this, how this production, distribution, and consumption, all these things are related to economic, social, biophysical, and the policy matters. Okay. So here this is the flow chart of, we can say this is the flow chart of like food pipeline, that is from the producer to consumer. This is the flow chart. That is, we can say that from the producer it is coming to the pre-processing stage. Again the broken grain, then excessive dehulling, trimming, all kinds of things takes place. Then thereafter the transport stage. The transport stage, again transport and storage. Transport and storage, these are being again these are being going through the heat chambers through the optimum heat and heat applications, etc. for the transport, that is the spillage, breakage and the leakage, all kinds of things due to the transport during the stage of the transport. And the storage also, different kind of things like the these are the due to the damage because of the insects, bacteria, then birds, and over ripening, all kinds of things. Then some of this in the storage also, some food products are also being damaged. Then thereafter the processing and packaging, processing and packaging. So during this time, again rain and humidity, it has its impact also. Rain and humidity as another factor. So here processing and in packaging stage also, inefficiency, how the packets, how the food products are being packaged, inefficiency. Then during this packaging, inefficiency, excessive peeling, trimming and polishing, etc. These are the things it should be optimum. These things also affect the foods during this processing stage. And there is also the risk of contamination. There is also risk of the contamination after the production. Then after going through these 4 stages: pre-processing, transport, storage, then processing and packaging. Thereafter it goes to the marketing. So at the stage of the marketing, again some foods are that means some percentage of foods are ready for the marketing, that is fresh and are safe, whereas other portion are unsafe foods, quality losses, and the contaminated, all these ones. So how to retain the maximum products that is contamination free, or how to ensure the quality, how to make it safe, so that is again another challenge. And thereafter it goes to the consumption stage. So start production to distribution to consumption, this is the flow chart. And how the process during this process, this process will be, the food will be damaged, and the contamination will be, there is a risk of contaminations or quality loss will be there. So this is the model of the food processing. Then we'll go to, so there are the 3 pillars of the food security. There are primarily 3 pillars of the food security. That is the stages that we have discussed. That is production, then distribution, and consumption. Similar pillars are, first thing is, as per the WHO, first is the food access. Food access means having sufficient resources to obtain the appropriate food for the nutritious diet. Like suppose in the market, if sufficient foods are available, sufficient varieties of fruits and vegetables are available, then the customer will have, the stakeholders will have the food access, proper access to identify, to discriminate, to find out, to make a choice of what to buy, what not to buy, or how to stick to the appropriate quality nutritious diets. That they have the options of the choices and the selection. But that is why, for that reason, the food must be available. Then food access should be sufficient. Food must be available in a plenty amount. Then the food availability, sufficient quantities of the food available on a consistent basis. It's not just seasonal, it's not just festival oriented, but every time, all the time, around the year, the sufficient quantities of the quality foods are already available from different sources. So then the customer can have a choice. Then the food use, appropriate use based on the knowledge of the basic nutrition. Then the consumers, how they are buying the food products and how they are consuming it, using it with the and storing it, preserving at home, and using it without wasting the food. So that is that means as well as the adequate water and sanitation. Here food is also associated with proper water and sanitation, and how the consumers, they are using it after purchase, after buying the products, how they are preserving it, storing it in their household, and using it. So that is the food use. So these 3 pillars are implemented by the United Nations also, and WHO. So it shows that how these are the 3 pillars of the food security. How can we ensure the safety and security of the food? That depends on these 3 pillars, the conditions: food accessibility, food availability, and food use, how the consumers are using it. So that is how we can say. So here we can see this the cycle of the food security, that is the food security. So that exists when all the people and at all times have the physical and economic access to different sufficient amount of quality foods. That is the, so here there are 4 things: access, availability, then utilization, and then stability. Another domain is the stability. So that is the sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet their daily dietary needs and the food preferences for an active and healthy life. They have the sufficient choices, they have the sufficient access and availability of the food to make a choice for their, as per their food habits, as per their health requirements. So that is the, so here availability, access, utilization and stability, these are the four important domains. And under the access, you can say access dependent on the food access, access to procure the food, it depends on the political, economic, social factors also, like now equitable distribution policy, then the markets or infrastructure affordability, then purchasing power of the public, all these things. So how to ensure that when the individuals and the households, they have the adequate resources to obtain the appropriate food, resources in terms of income, in terms of employment, in terms of financial capacity, in terms of to some extent also the good amount of that means education to identify, to differentiate and to take a decision, right decision, what to buy, what not to buy, and how to use the food properly. Access, availability, as you can say, availability, there is a reliable supply of the food and sufficient quantity and quality also. There is a regular supply of food stocks from different sources, and it is also sufficient and the in terms of good and in terms of quality. So that depends on the domestic production, whether the farmers were producing it on their own. Food stocks, cold storage is available in that area, what percentage of food stuff are being imported, that is import policy, etc. Then food aid, what are the aids they are getting from the different sources, government and NGOs sources, or World WHO or other international agencies sources. So that is the food availability. On what ground? Like this pandemic time, for example, from time to time you can see that rations are being distributed among the poor people from time to time, usually every month, bi-monthly or monthly kind of thing. So that is the because of the shortage, because of the food insecurity, shortage of the food. So there are separate mechanism have been started to distribute the minimum quantity or minimum amount of the food, minimum amount of the food and the quantity of the food, quality food, to all the poor in the village and the rural areas. Then comes the stability. Stability is that it depends on the how do we maintain. So maintenance of all the three pillars. If all the three pillars are properly maintained, then the stability is there. So stability, so there is no risk of loss of supply or the economic things or political effects, etc. Then that is stability. But utilization, again, utilization depends on that is that food safety, food quality, nutritional knowledge, proper preparation, then clean water, sanitation, healthcare. So after utilization comes the stability. After utilization, we can say the cycle is like that. Once it is available, then becomes accessible. Once it is accessible, then comes our utilization. How do we utilize it? If we purposefully, meaningfully and sustainably use it, so then something can be then again preserved. Something can be preserved and restored. So after utilization, like during this utilization or use period, food safety, food quality, if it can be controlled, if you have the sufficient knowledge for preserving the food products, proper preparation is there in terms of infrastructure, there is sufficient cold storage, then go downs, etc. and sufficient, then when there is a proper ensuring that the food is nutritious and can be adequately metabolized with the clean water, then healthcare facilities, etc. Sometimes the preservatives for preserving the food products for the long term, then by using different mechanisms of techniques of preservation to preserve the food in terms of making sauce, making juice, making all kinds of the pickles, etc. and dry fruits and the dry all kinds of things. So this is the after utilization, how to preserve it. Then comes our stability, that is called to ensure that whatever it is there, it is permanent, durable access to the food. That means it has been preserved in safely and wisely. Now it can be procured and it can be used for the long term, for the rest of the year. So this is the whole cycle of the food mechanism, food security mechanism, and these are the three pillars, like from that is like production, distribution and consumption. Here food access during the consumption, food access, food availability, food utilization, and thereafter the food, how to save the food grains, that is the stability. Then this is the food insecurity, the vulnerability of different countries in this climatic change scenario. This is a picture, like you can say that how some countries are vulnerable to food insecurity because of this, because of the climatic change, maybe excessive cold. So in as you can see, this North America and Canada and this kind of cold countries, usually they import the foods from other countries, because of the climatic reason. So there comes the food shortage, and another thing is that food insecurity is a reason of the food insecurity is food shortages and wastage. So this is the graphical graphical data of which country wastes the food, what amount of food. Europe, this is the thing, and North America. So these are the graphical things of which country, which region wastes the most of the food. This is the graphic one. So in food shortage, again, food shortage, why food shortage takes place? Because food shortage usually in developing countries is very common. Why? The people are not so informed, informed or educated to learn about the new techniques and strategies of preservation, and moreover, it also affects the small time farmers, smallholder farmers, whose families depend on their own surplus grains and survive between the harvest, but they don't know the exact mechanism of, or they don't have the resources to preserve the food grains. So then again, periodic also, sometimes this thing happens because of the periodic, like from one harvest to another harvest, if there is a scarcity of food, then that is called the hungry season. Hungry season, that happens not because of any climatic change or anything, but as because the family completely depends on that their own harvesting products, and throughout the year they cannot manage it. They consume it, and it gets exhausted by after some months, and by rest of the months, unless and until the next season of harvesting takes place, so that means they are malnourished, they are deprived of this kind of food items. So minimum somehow they are minimum kind of foods that they are getting, or by doing some labor work, some other kind of thing, wage based works, that they somehow manage. So this period from one harvest to another harvest, that is called the hungry season, because of this harvesting, that means time gap, so they are deprived of this thing. So, and another thing is that very low income families, world families with very low income also, that means low income families, that means below poverty, people who are below poverty line. So towards the end of the month, actually that means they spend all the money, they fall short of this money towards the end of the month, and they had made they adjusted, they spent all the money towards that means within the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the months. So that is why they usually towards the last part of the month, they usually skip the meals. They eventually they somehow manage, they strive to get 2 meals together, or they become dependent on some other people around, like the people of like the landlords or where they are working, etc. So they eventually cannot meet their meals towards the end of the month, as because they completely exhausted their money by the second or third week of the month. So that happens to the families who are very poor, low income families. Then another reason for the food shortage is again the wastage of money. So around found out around 40% of the food grown in the countries are being, or 40% of the shortage takes place because of the spoilage, because of the wastage. So small holders, farmers also, they do not have the adequate storage facility, like they establishing a cold storage, preservation, or the defreezing the things, all kinds of this. They don't have the facility and resources to store the and preserve the food grains, etc. And again these things are without because of the lack of proper preservation and preservatives, etc., and the storage, so they get wasted and the wasted. So the food wastage, like for usually in the rainy season, rainy season, the vegetables and foods get spoiled, like for example onions and things, so many things, because they got wasted, especially the green vegetables and the agricultural products, because of the lack of proper storage facility and proper resources. Even the farmers, individual farmers also in their household, they cannot manage to they cannot, only in the natural processes they whatever they preserve, but from their own land whatever they produce, either they sell it or consume it, but they don't have any mechanism to preserve it for the future use. So these are some of the factors of the food shortage, and the wastage. Now I am closing it here. Thank you very much. Next class we will continue with this thing. Thank you.